Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Executive Table Talk. My name is JT O'Donnell. I'm the founder and CEO of Work It Daily, and I'm the host of today's episode. Really excited to have back with us today Michael Willis. You know that he is a sports executive, worked in finance and operations at the NFL. And today we're going to be talking about risk resiliency, specifically building a future for your business with confidence, which is a topic that he knows an awful lot about. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to bring him right up to the screen. Hey, Michael.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Good to see you. Good to be
Oh.
here. It's a great topic.
It is a great topic. And I want you to tell everybody the backstory of how you really got into this and why you think it's so important.
Yes, my journey, thank you, JT. My journey with on being on the risk team started several years back. We have internal auditors come every 3 years, and my boss was looking for someone to kind of be the contact person, so he picked me, and I'm glad he did. We went through an audit cycle, matter of fact, 2 audit cycles, and we received a satisfactory rating, and I thought, okay, it was not the best, not the lowest. We're right in the middle, it's okay. So I was happy with that. So then we had some change of leadership there, and a new leader come in, and he was looking for someone again. And so someone said, well, Michael Willis, he did it before. So he called me up to his office and said, I want you to run the audit, to be the lead person. But he says, I don't know why we're just at a satisfactory. I want an exemplary rating. I want us to have the highest rating. I want us to be the bell tower of the audit, the internal audit. So he said, I want you to meet with the auditors, introduce yourself again, and tell them what I said about being exemplary. Why aren't we there? So I met with the auditors, and the internal auditors said, Mike, you're never going to get exemplary ratings with past findings. We found some findings, and it wasn't corrected for 2 audit cycles, things that weren't corrected. I said, oh, I wasn't aware of that. And he said, yeah, so you're never going to get. And he said, matter of fact, he said, you really shouldn't have gotten satisfactory. Should have really been unsatisfactory. So I said, okay, well, what were the findings? So the 2 of the findings was, one were the medical files. I'm going to say, well, what do you mean medical files? Well, when they had the audit, they asked to see the medical files of our officials. And the person said, okay, well, here they are. Reached over, and here they are right here. So they said, oh, okay, that's the files. Yeah, that's the file. So they wrote that up, of course. And the second thing was the contracts. They wanted to see certain contracts. They wanted certain people. So it took them a long time. The audit's only about 2 to 3 weeks long, and it took 4 or 5 days. So the auditors would circle back and say, did you find the contracts that we wanted? And I'm like, well, we're still looking for it. People have come and gone. So when it comes to the medical files, there's HIPAA laws that say the files have to be in a locked cabinet. So they have to be in a locked cabinet. So the first thing that I did was, when I got their prior report, and I talked to my boss about it. He says, I want this corrected. You got it. And the first thing to correct is those 2 findings. So, and he says, anybody gives you any pushback, let me know, because if you don't want to follow the audit, you don't want to, cooperate, he said, you can't work here. So that was his first thing he said. So, so I went back. So I told the person, with the files, I said, so we found a cabinet, I got a key, a locked cabinet. So when they came back to do the audit, the first thing said, well, let me see the medical files. So went to the drawer, unlocked the drawer, opened the drawer. And the auditor said, we're not housekeepers. Now, if you want to throw all the files in the drawer, no problem. We don't care about that. It just has to be in it. And then when I finished, lock the drawer back until they crossed it off the list. It was as simple as that. So when it came to the contracts, I said, okay, we need to have an electronic copies of the contract. So that's what we did. We try to put things in our in Word and put contracts, and they just want to see the signatures, but also you can get it to the auditors fast, because the faster you get them things that they want. I was always told that if you give people what they want, they leave you alone. They tend to leave you alone if you get people what they need. So, and also too, when it comes to the timing of the audit, if you get them the samples, they're going to give you, let's say we want to see 25 invoices. They were looking for approvals, signatures, proper signature authority. Let's say, like I had a $25,000 or $30,000 sign authority. They'll look at some invoices that were 75, 100,000. They want to make sure that, yeah, Mike signed it, but also his boss signed it. So, and he has a 2 million. So they want to make sure there's signing authorities. And same thing with a check. If a check comes in, they want to follow that check from when I received it, all the way sent it to finance, all the way when they sent the checks to the bank, all the way till it got cash and it's in our account. They're following that paper trail the whole way through.
I love it.
That's what they're looking for.
Interesting. So that was a real eye-opener for you, I'm sure, to be able to see that it's the checks and balances that need to be in place. So let's talk about it. You're going to break around for every day today. What are we going to cover?
We're going to cover, first of all, I want to cover the auditor said one more thing, that there's no such thing as a perfect company. Like there's no such thing as a perfect marriage or friendship. You have to work at this stuff. You have to. So I want to talk about risk. I want to define risk. There's definition of risk, identifying risk, which is the most important takeaway from this discussion. You have to be able to identify your risk and tell your story. That's the three biggest things of today.
Okay.
So
amazing. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about the definition of risk.
Yes, the definition of risk is a potential event or circumstance that can lead to adverse consequences such as harm, loss, damage, negative impact on an individual, organization, project, or a system. So a lot of these risks are inherent. There's some risks that are built into whatever you do. You went to work this morning, you cross the street. Well, it's dangerous. So you want to make sure you cross at the crosswalk. You want to cross with the light. Now, you're not just going out into the middle of the street. You want to make sure you protect yourself. So that's the big part of risk. That's the takeaway. So you want to make sure that you protect yourself. And there are many, many different types of risks, and identifying risks, which is on the next slide.
Yeah, let me ask you. Yeah, let's talk about identifying key risks, because I'm hoping there are checklists or something that they provide people. Otherwise, you're just kind of shooting from the hip, right?
Yeah. Well, there are many different kinds of risks, and one of the kinds of risks are security risks, fraud, compliance risks, operational risks, economic risks, reputational risks. There are many types of risks. Now, dealing in football, I was working with the game officials. We wanted to make sure our officials didn't have any affiliation with the team, so we made sure that they signed it was called a positive confirmation, where they signed a document saying that they have no family members, sister, brother, or any connections with the team. So you just don't ask a group of people, say, look, if you have a family affiliation with the New England Patriots, raise your hand, come up and sign this. No, you got everyone to sign. You got everyone to sign and say, I have no contact. Now, if the person did have a contact at the team, a family member or something, it's not a deal breaker. It's okay. No one has to leave their job. No one did anything wrong. It's just that person couldn't officiate that game. They couldn't work that game at that team. So they made sure that, things are fair, because if someone knows that they have an affiliation, the person, a brother or sister, can say, look, watch out for this, don't call this. So it can't be any contact. Also, when it came to gambling, officials can't gamble on any of the games. So our NFL security reached out to gambling, Vegas, the sites as far as gambling, and also we ran the officials' credit reporting, the credit rating, to make sure there's nothing out there. Because a team can say, look, you guys see some debts here, we'll take care of that if you just look the other way. So we want to make sure that there aren't these kind of exposures there. And another thing is that the locker rooms are scrubbed, meaning sometimes the visitors' locker rooms, the NFL security will go through and make sure there's no listening devices in the rooms. I mean, these are some of the things that the fans may not be aware of when it comes to watching the game. And there was one situation. This is about identifying risk. There was one a situation that we had was during the Super Bowl. Right after the Super Bowl, you had a group that identified, hey, look, there were no African Americans in the game. Well, when you go to court, you have to make sure you have documentation in your hands. So every game, every play, the officials are graded. They get grades on good calls, bad calls. Sometimes they don't make any calls, and they get graded on that. So when it comes to the end of the season, all their grades are tallied, and that's how they work round by round, the playoff rounds. And then when it comes to the Super Bowl, well, these are the people that made the grades. So now you have proof of something in your hands. So that's part of you protecting your company through litigation. And that's why these risks are very, very important. Knowing your risk are very, very important, because you never know, you wind up in court. You want to have something saying that you didn't just pick, 12 people. Oh, well, these people I want. No, it wasn't that way. It's a system, and it's a way of doing it. So that's why it's important. The next thing on the list is assessing risk tolerance. Some risks are low risk. Some things are low level risk. Some things are high risk. And it depends on how you monitor the risk, and what's important, what's your appetite for the risk, and which leads into the next one. But how much risk are you willing to be okay with? And you put a little 1 to 5, And then you want to communicate that risk with your team. You want to let people know that you're working with that. Hey, we can only take this much risk. This is very high risk. If you run into a high risk situation, you want to let people know what the risk strategy is, which leads into the implement of a risk strategy. That's a plan to play it safe, protect yourself, a backup plan. You want to always make sure you have these things in place to make sure that you're running your business as efficient as possible. So that's why these things. But identifying your risk, if you can't identify your risk, it's especially as a leader, vice president, or leader of a company, a leader of a department, it's very important that you know how to identify your risk, because when the auditors come in to, and that's going to a couple slides down the road, when they come in and say, are you ready for the audit? You want to be able to give them something in their hands and say, these are our risks. So you're telling your story yourself, because they're going to find these things themselves. So it's better if you tell your story than they tell you, because they're going to find these things. They go, did you test this? Or what about this? You have exposure here. You have exposure there. So it's better if you tell it, and also you tell them what the risks are, and let them know how you're monitoring these risks. We're monitoring this. We're testing these things. We're keeping an eye on it, whether it's weekly, monthly, once a year. We make sure that we follow, or we have the NFL security follow these things, and they're monitoring these risks. Okay. So you want to manage it.
All right. I have a couple of questions. It's so interesting. So the first time, let's go back to your story. The first time they come in, they do an assessment, and they give you, a passable grade, but not what ultimately your future boss wanted. From that, were you able to start to prioritize, or at least wrap your head around what risks you needed to mitigate for? And did the auditors also offer you any additional insights or resources about how to further explore risk, or really has it had to come down to you looking at it and making an assessment for yourself? Is there anything people can access to help them?
Well, yes, the auditors told me the first thing to do was to get rid of the old stuff, the prior findings that were found two audit cycles ago. You got to clean that up. You have to get that off the list. So that's the first thing I tackled, were those two findings, and they were very easy to just a locked drawer. So it was very easy to fix these things, but they weren't fixed. So and sometimes things aren't fixed because sometimes there's a change in staff. Sometimes there's, people change, people come, people go, and things aren't. So, identifying these risks and knowing these risks is something. But when it comes to the auditors, they just gave me a guide. They said, this is the scope of the audit. We're going to be testing these things. And sometimes in the beginning of the audit, and especially when they don't know the department, they'll ask for a lot of samplings. They'll ask for 25 samplings. They'll ask for, let me see these 10 contracts. Sometimes they're the biggest contract. They're looking for signatures. They're looking for NFL. You follow NFL policy, and then our EV people give them department policies. So they're saying, are you following the league's policy? And then you have policies yourself. So they get both these policies, and then when they do their testing, they're looking at, are you following the NFL policy? Because these auditors don't work for the league office in the office. They work for the owners. So the owners want to see that they're the one giving the league office money. We don't make money, we don't sell anything. So we get our money from the teams that sell the tickets and sell the merchandise. So they're funding the NFL office. So they're letting us know, we're letting them know that we're spending the money in a very diligent fashion and very professional fashion.
Fair. So, yeah, that makes sense. So it's great then. You had something to work on, but then you had something to proactively build so that when they come each year, you're saying, okay, here are the most common risks and how we mitigate them or deal with them on a regular basis. So you're being more open, I think. And this is what leads into telling your story. Is that really
the
key?
Yes. Okay, that leads into telling your story. That leads into, so you tell your story. So when the auditors come in, you're telling your auditors, you're showing them these are the risks that we have. And some things, like I said, are inherent risks. There's some risks that we want our games to be officiated. We want our games to be, all of our games, to be as fair as possible. And that's what we're here to do. We don't care who wins, who loses, first place team, last. We're here to make sure that all the teams have a equal access and equal opportunity to win.
Okay.
All the teams. We want all to have the same access. So we want to tell the story of any kind of risk exposures. And then we want to tell, again, auditors are our stakeholders. We want to tell anybody that has anything to do with our department, we want to let them know that these are our risks. And this is how we're monitoring these risks. And we're taking action by monitoring, testing, and letting people know that, we are looking. And that's what the auditors expect. They don't expect, and the first thing the auditors said to me, we don't expect you to be perfect. We know you're not perfect. The league isn't perfect, but it's those imperfections. What are you doing, and how do you test those imperfections? How do you test those items, and how are you monitoring? And that's the exemplary. And yes, we did get an exemplary rating after these things were cleaned up, and so we did become a lighthouse to other departments. And it was possible. I didn't realize it was possible. I just thought a satisfactory was good, but when you look at risk and take risks in a very responsible way. Again, no one's expecting you to be perfect. I thought, we needed a perfect situation, but no, there's no department perfect or company perfect, marriage perfect. And you work on things. You're in a marriage, maybe you go to the counseling, or maybe you spend time together, you go to vacations together. So these are kind of things you do to mitigate the risk of not being together.
So I have a question for you. So I know that in healthcare, like for example, in nursing facilities, I have family members that are nurses and nurse practitioners, and they talk about the auditors coming from the state. So if they don't pass, they're in trouble, right? I mean, they could shut the facility down, right? Things like that. It could get warnings. You're working, like in the case of private sector, you working for the NFL, you're reporting to the owners. What would the ramifications have been for us, like for really low, like if you failed?
Yeah, the ramification would be, the EVP has to explain that. The person that's in charge of everything, and the auditors report back to the owners, they want to know. They'll talk to the commissioner. So the EVP, the person that's in charge of the department, will have to sit with the commissioner and find out why is your department that you're running not running the way it's supposed to be run, because now the owners are on the commissioner, because the commissioner reports to the owners. So the owners are saying, look, I don't want this guy on me. Do what you're supposed to do. They don't want the owners on them about why things aren't being run right. And it's our finance. They're funding us. They're the one this is how we make our money. This is how we pay our bills around here. So of course the ownership wants to make sure that everything is being run right at the league office, just like at their own team level. They make sure that their teams are running efficiently, and they make sure they say, look, we're giving these people a lot of money. We want to make sure that they're using our money in a very responsible way. So that's why we have the internal auditors, and that's why they report right to the owners, not to the commissioner. So it keeps everybody on a fair basis.
Right. And like you said, it's helping have the confidence that you're minimizing bad things that could happen.
Right.
Let's talk about this monitor and testing of what you implement, undertake action. How would you test, for example, to make sure that what you've put in place is working?
Yeah, you would do. It could be a monthly test. It could be a daily test. You monitoring. So you monitor the controls you put in place. Like I said about the officials at the beginning of the season, maybe you don't have to monitor that and say, look, everyone signed a positive confirmation that there are no any relatives working at other teams. So you don't have to monitor that so close. So that'll be a very low level, because it's very important they don't have anybody, but they got a signed agreement that we have. So if we do find out something, we have now something in the paper, so we can dismiss them based on, because they have a union. Their union chief is going to say, look, why are you letting this person go? Because they lied to us, and we have a documentation. So yes, there's monitoring. Sometimes it's IT things. Sometimes it's a compliant thing. Compliance or things of that nature. So you monitoring, even like with the NFL security, they monitor the security of our officials as far as it goes to gambling. So they're looking at the gambling sites to make sure our officials aren't taking place in gambling, aren't taking activity and those kinds of activities. Credit reports, they monitor the credit reports, make sure if they have a very bad credit rating or their credit is very out of balance, they want to make sure they're monitoring all these types of things.
It sounds kind of interesting. So you identify a risk, as you've talked about, right? You think about what you want to put in place to mitigate that risk, to keep it small, but then you also put a check and balance in place to make sure that you can stay on top of that. It's very I don't know, it's like detective work in a way, it's
Yeah.
kind of fun.
It is. But this is why it's so important, because it's very important. And the main thing is to identify. That's the biggest takeaway, because if you can't identify your risk, and that's really any business. That's really any business. And like you were saying about the nursing home, I mean, the nursing home, they're checking for certain things as far as, medication that maybe wasn't, because my grandmother was in a nursing home and sometimes she'd refuse medication. Well, they would document that. So if my grandmother died of something, you can say, well, she was on medication for this. How could she? Well, she refused medication on this date, this date. They don't force it down her. They don't make her take it. They offer it to her and she's, I don't want that. I'm not taking anything. They just document it. They document it. So if there's ever any kind of litigation or something, the nurse can say, she was on this, but there were 10 times here that we have documented that she refused it. She refused the medication. So that's how, so that's what, they have the states coming in and make sure that, the patients are getting out of bed. I remember my grandmother nursing home, making sure they got out of bed, there's activities, make sure that, they're changed or they're properly cared for, they're shaved, they're getting, so those are kind of things that they're looking at. They're trying to monitor. Also too, when it comes to those types of things, I know a lot of times there's Social Security. I remember my grandfather, the Social Security check didn't go to my mom anymore. It went to the nursing home. So those kind of things they're looking at, where is this stuff going and where is proper funding and things of that nature.
Is there such a thing? I don't even know if you'd know the answer. Is there risk insurance? Does an organization, I mean, in your case, it was the risk to the owners, but like, is there anything else people can purchase or do? Can they have like independent auditors come in to help them identify things before the real ones come in? Like, have you heard of anything like that?
Yes, I have heard like, if you go in insurance companies, they have risk auditors that look at your company as a whole and see what kind of risks you have. Yes, there are businesses that, if you want to pay, but it's good for any kind of business to get audited from time to time to make sure money's going in the right place, money's not being, I mean, you never know. I mean, you have an employee, you would think everything is being put in the right place and managed, but sometimes there should be good checks and balances. And also when you go for loans and when you go for maybe another company wants to purchase your company, it's good if they had an audit. They know hey, look, this is being managed. She's getting an audit every few years or every 2 years. They're being audited. So I trust this company when I want to buy it. I trust that things are being run properly.
So fascinating, Michael. All right, folks, just so you know, I am talking to Michael Willis. He's been on Executive Table Talk many times before, but specifically today, he's talking about risk resilience and just how to build up a safe way to be able to manage risk in your organization. So if you have questions for Michael, please feel free to put them in the chat. What I did want to do is make sure that I put up his LinkedIn profile here. Please. I know that he is completely open to you connecting with him on LinkedIn. Be sure to follow him. He's posting some fabulous content on LinkedIn, but also invite him to connect. Just promise me that you'll send him a custom connection request and let him know you saw him here on Executive Table Talk. Okay. So I will bring that back up at the end as well. But Michael, I want to take the last amount of time that we have here to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
When you got the exemplary status for risk in your group, was there anything between where you were and where you got to that you discovered or uncovered that you didn't even know was a problem? And could you talk about what that was like and what you did to mitigate that?
It was very good to get that exemplary rating because other departments were told about this. But yeah, I mean, it was good to know that, what the auditors are looking for. And that's what I learned a lot by finding out what they're looking for and what they're testing and standards, certain standards. So that helped with our training. So when we got this exemplary rating, it helped when we got new people in, but also it helped in training even our existing employees. I mean, the existing employees were very happy that we got this rating. And also we had training when it came to, like I said, about copying contracts and doing things in a measured way. I mean, this helped our department kind of grow in a direction of, look, this is what I'm going to keep this document. I'm going to make sure that we have all these things in place. So I know the auditors are going to come around. I know they're going to ask for this. So it got people thinking in that kind of mindset of thinking that I know somebody's going to ask me about this. I know that we're going to be asked about these signatures. So you don't take shortcuts when it comes to doing your day-to-day job. When it comes to getting signatures of contracts and making sure they're a signature, the level of signature. Sometimes if it's this document or this invoice is above your signing authority, you want to make sure you get the right people to sign off on it.
It really sounds like, so if you have a job that involves risk, it sounds like you very easily could be scared all the time for fear that the risk was going to come get you. But it really sounds like you embrace the idea of, okay, let me tackle it. Let me understand it. Let me put things in place that will give me, as you label this, the resiliency, the confidence, a way to reduce my anxiety because I've got a way to protect myself. Does that sound right?
Absolutely right. I mean, every business, you're going to have some sort of risk involved in it. If you really start to think about it, like, what if your system doesn't work? What if this podcast, this system, it doesn't work? Let's say the power is out. You want to say, look, hey, this could be a problem. I can't, have podcasts. I run my business based on having these connectivities. I need this connection. So you want to make sure, you can't walk away from it or not think about it. You have to embrace it and say, look, I know there's risk built into everything that we do. I mean, we used to have a church down the street from our office as a place, a safe haven place to go to, just in case the office caught on fire, if there was a catastrophic event. So you just don't have people go home. You want to make sure you can account for everyone. So there was a church that we had set up down the street where we had water, crackers, things that are just in case we had to be there for a few hours. So you mitigated. You want to make sure you mitigate your risk of losing people. You want people to know where to go. So we had drills on that. We had drills on where to go. So we had like fire drills. Okay, we're having a catastrophic event. You're going to go across the street. So you want to make sure you mitigate your risk and know what your risks are and don't be afraid of it. Go towards it, face it, and say, look, we know we have exposure here, here, and here, but this is how we handle it. This is what we're going to do to handle it.
All right. So now I'm going to ask you a question. You clearly got the risk mitigation bug. Like, yes, I don't think everyone, and it's such a compliment, by the way, because I think a lot of people would, like you said, run away from it. And you just said with enthusiasm, no, run towards it. So I got to ask you, in your own life now, do you find yourself looking at every aspect of your life and how to mitigate risk? Like, has it become just sort of a mental way of operating?
Yes, definitely inherent. Because I think about, thinking, well, what if this happens? Sometimes I get driving away crazy with that. But yeah, I do think about things like that. What if this happens? Is there another plan? Is there another way to go? Or how do I mitigate these type risks? How do I make it so if it does happen, it's not such a hard blow?
Right.
So that's the kind of things that you kind of build it into your own personal life. Like I said about crossing the street, you just don't walk out in the traffic. You gotta make sure you cross at the crosswalk. Make sure that some people say, don't you care about yourself? You care about yourself that you cross where you're supposed to cross, and so you mitigate, so keep yourself safe. So but yeah, I do put it in my life as far as things I do, just to make things run smooth.
I do. I think it really reflects in your work too. Having had the pleasure of collaborating with you over the last year, you're always well informed. You're always well prepared. And folks, if you take away anything from it, I think that just creates such a level of professionalism to lean into risk and figure out options, like you said, as opposed to, running away from it and putting yourself at risk, right? I love it.
That's exactly right.
So folks, I want to remind you, I don't, 30 minutes always goes too fast with you, Michael, by the way. Please go find Michael on LinkedIn. Here is his LinkedIn profile. Just look up Michael Willis and make sure that you send him a custom connection request and that you saw him on ETT. It really helps him know who's reaching out to him. Yeah. So I hope that you will do that. Michael, I'm going to throw the microphone back to you and say, what's your final words on this? What's the one big takeaway you want everyone to remember?
Big takeaway: know your risk, know how to identify your risk, and to take action. Take action on your risk. That's it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Take action. You heard it, folks. Stop running away. Run towards the risk and take action. Fantastic. All right, everyone. Well, this is another Executive Table Talk on the books. Thank you so much for stopping by today. It was a great session. Happy holidays to everybody, and we'll see you next time. Remember, if you want to win, you got to work it daily. Bye, everyone.